The issue with the drug-free goal, I think, is really complex. Science categorizes everything as a drug, and it becomes quite a broad goal to have. It's unrealistic because for centuries drugs have been around, and in one form or the other, drugs are consumed every day by people who need them. Drugs are also consumed by people who want them, who need them, who want them every single day. Drugs cannot disappear simply because there will always be a need for them. This whole demand and supply conundrum. There will always be a need for drugs, whether it's to ease pain or to get high. It's irrelevant. People need opiate-based drugs, so therefore opium needs to be cultivated to make medicines. Unless the world finds a fitting substitute for opiate-based medicine, I think drugs are going to be around forever. And for any country or region to aspire to a drug-free goal or drug-free region or drug-free zone, I think it's ridiculous, and it's just, it's just politics. It was only after 1985 that the drug law was institutionalized in our country. Before 1985, there was no specific criminal offense attached to drug use. In India, traditionally, the use of marijuana has been accepted all across the country. We have traditional marijuana users, traditional opium users. We've had that for centuries. It's just after the UN conventions, the government of India had to sign and criminalize drug use and implement a very harsh drug law.
I work mainly with street-based drug users. So for us, there are just so many issues, from mental issues to no food, to no access to drinking clean water, no shelter, and on top of that with HIV, Hep C, tuberculosis. And for people who come from the streets, they see no light at the end of the tunnel. So the drug is actually the best thing in your life if you're from the streets.
The first HIV was diagnosed in Nagaland was way back in 1990. First official diagnosis was among the injecting drug users. And then immediately the government of Nagaland and Manipur has become alarmed, and then they just ban needle and syringe in all the pharmacies. Therefore, the injecting drug users start sharing needles and syringe. So that is how the ramdam spread of HIV among the community has come about.
I don't think incarcerating drug users is the answer, because as I said, using drugs is just a symptom, because people need treatment, and actually it's a mental health issue. Most people would need proper treatment. If you are going to incarcerate them, then I think that actually the problem might worsen. If you look at Manipur, even initially, people who were on codeine, which is cough syrup, they were thrown into jail so that they would stop having cough syrup. But they all came back out of jail as injecting drug users, as well as most of them were HIV positive.
Part of the Indian government feels that when we distribute needles and syringes, when we provide buprenorphine for oral substitution, we are kind of encouraging drug use. However, these two interventions have in fact contributed to reducing HIV infection, to reducing AIDS-related deaths, to reducing exposure to hepatitis C. And of course, at the end of the day, you know, there's this whole cost effectiveness argument. You spend so much money on trying to control a population's behavior that you miss major issues that kind of tend to fall between the cracks. And one of those major issues is public health.
NDPS Act, it punishes the user too much. I mean, the Act calls for at least minimum of 1 year in jail, whether you possess or you just possess or you forget about using, and even if you are suspected of using.
NDPS has laid down certain stipulations whereby certain procedures have to be followed, so that the person who is caught with possession of drugs is being punished and to ensure conviction.
I've come across a lot of people who have just started using, and because they've been caught for possessing a small quantity, they are sent to jail. Inside jail, yes, they may abstain, but when they come out, they get stigmatized in a double way. First, as a drug user, and secondly, as a criminal.
We have seen that in prison, most of the time, when these drug users are caught, they are tortured badly. And it takes a lot of time for police personnel to understand what they are going through, even for a small withdrawal symptom. The police personnel, they don't understand what actually is happening to them. We have had lots of cases where drug users were arrested and have died in lockups, because during that time, there was no sensitization programs for the police personnel to understand what a drug user is, what are his withdrawal symptoms, and what is the immediate medical attention he has to get.
People don't really understand what drug abuse is all about. Most people view it either as a crime or being morally wrong, sinful, and I think that attitude has got to change.
We should look at drugs as the enemy, not the person. That's why down the line we've been having sensitive sensitization programs, awareness programs for our own men that look at the drug user as a person who's suffering, and we need to help him, not as a person who we should punish.
If we continue with this criminalization, then I believe that we will lose so many youngsters' life through HIV, hepatitis B and C. Therefore, it's better to decriminalize personal drug use.